When an atheist writes a book mentioning the devil, it must be interesting. And if this person is the long-time publisher of Skeptic magazine, it must be fascinating. So today I'm honored and privileged to have Dr. Michael Shermer on my show. Michael Shermer is a publisher, the long-time publisher of Skeptic magazine. He is the author of many, many books, including Why People Believe Weird Things, and another book that he wrote with Arthur Benjamin, Mental Math. So big fan. Michael, thank you so much for coming today to the show.
Oh, you're welcome, and thanks for the kind remarks. And yeah, that book by Art Benjamin and myself, he's really the mentalist, mathematical mentalist. Since you're a mentalist, you understand how that works. I'm just the scribe that helped write that. But I appreciate you holding up the cover of my first book, Why People Believe Weird Things. Actually, the cover behind me, you see there on the door, that's the original oil painting for the original cover, which is up there on the shelf. Coming up on 25 years in 2 years.
Wow.
So, yeah, I've been at this for a while.
Okay, so
anyway, I've been to Israel twice, actually.
Yes.
You have a beautiful country. Yeah.
I think that we need to talk right now because some of what you mentioned in your last book, of your most recent book, Giving the Devil His Due, I think is closely related to what's going on now in Israel with all the riots and all the protests against the prime minister, when the protests themselves during this horrible pandemic just cancel every or ignore every piece of logic. And in the name of getting rid of our prime minister, they are making very, very serious mistakes regarding the health of many people. But we will come to this later on. Now, let me start with the first question, because I just recently published my fourth book. I think that this is like a bad timing to publish a book during this pandemic, no?
Well, yeah, my last book, the Giving the Devil's Due, came out in April, which was, right. It was pretty much the week after the entire shutdown of all retail stores. So bookstore sales obviously plummeted. There were no sales. But, we thank goodness for Amazon and other online retailers. We got to mention them as well, like Walmart and Costco and so forth. But yeah, we're living in strange times for sure. And the mask and social distancing, I think it matters. There's a lot of conspiracy theories I'm worried about that people therefore ignore just really basic precautions like social distancing and face masks. It's so easy to do, and it's really not that disruptive. And here in America, people are very confused about freedom. They think freedom means I can do anything I want. That isn't what freedom means. Freedom means you can do anything you want within the confines of laws and customs and mores, and to what extent it affects other people. So people are accustomed to seeing signs in American restaurants that say no shoes, no shirt, no service. Well, you just throw in face mask as well. What's the big deal? That's their right to do that. And your right to swing your arm ends at my nose. You can't drive on the left side of the road in America just because you feel like it. You're not free to do that. So, it really gets back to political philosophy and Thomas Hobbes and the Leviathan, in which he articulated, not just him, but also Rousseau and Locke, about the social contract. And we give up lots of freedoms in order to be more secure, safe, healthy, and so forth. So all of civilization is about that trade-off between freedom and security. And we were seeing that being tested during COVID-19. And conspiracy theories, make it worse.
I would even say, or argue, that Hobbes' argument was that even the worst government is better than no government. This is was one of Hobbes' argument, but we are not in the worst government. And let me show you a picture that I got today on WhatsApp that says, we don't believe in science anymore. Yes, we have, if you believe in science, if you deny science, if you don't understand science, and if you believe in magic. So
That's really funny.
so
Right.
it's crazy. So now let's start. Who is the devil, and why should I give him his due?
Oh, well, the metaphorical devil in my book title is whoever disagrees with you, whoever you disagree with, whoever has ideas or thoughts or expresses them in speech that you find offensive or wrong or immoral or whatever. We should give those people their due, because if we don't, then our own safety is at risk to have our own thoughts that disagree with the orthodoxy. You know, it's easy to be in the majority and denounce those who are in the minority position on any particular belief, religion, politics, whatever. But what happens when you're the unorthodox thinker, when you have an idea that you want to put forth that challenges the orthodoxy? What happens when you're the heterodox, the heretic? So free speech laws and customs and principles really are there to protect the people who we disagree with the most. And so that's where the title comes from. And I'll read to you the little passage where I begin the book, which is how this originally got started to be challenged in the United States a century ago in 1919 in the case of Schenck versus the United States. This is when Supreme Court Justice Oliver
Freedom of
Wendell
speech.
Holmes.
You can't shout fire. I just read some of it.
Yes.
But please
that's right.
say it
So
again.
here's his most famous pronouncement. The most stringent protection of free speech would not protect a man in falsely shouting fire in a theater and causing a panic. The question in any case is whether the words used are used in such circumstances and are of such a nature as to create a clear and present danger that they will bring about the substantive evils that Congress has a right to prevent. So, clear and present danger is the classic phrase used from there. What's the clear and present danger? Falsely shouting fire in a theater. So, what's he referring to here? Who is this Schenck? Charles Schenck was the head of the Socialist Party in Philadelphia, and he was promoting or distributing flyers to draft-age men who were being drafted by the government and sent to war in Europe. This was 1918 when Schenck was doing this. So this is when the United States got into what now is called the First World War, or the Great War at the time. And the U.S. government imposed conscription. That is, we're going to take you and send you to war. And Schenck's argument was that that's a form of slavery. And according to the 13th Amendment, you can't enslave people. And now this is a debatable point, but this is what was the court determined would be a clear and present danger. That is, protesting the draft. I mean, that's crazy.
In our standards today.
Yes, of course, right, exactly. I mean, in the 60s, late 60s, people were protesting the draft, and protesting is free speech. That's part of our right to push back against government policy we don't like. And anyway, so the moment you create that category, that basket of items you're going to throw in there that I think are a clear and present danger, or you think are a clear and present danger, the problem with that is everything.
Who gets to decide?
Who gets to decide? And pretty much anything could be considered a clear and present danger if you think that you're right and everybody else is wrong. So that category has expanded over the course of the century to the point where now we're issuing lists of microaggressions that people might find offensive or that might hurt their feelings. And that's considered a clear and present danger. Therefore, they must be silenced. That's the problem.
Let me tell you, like a very concrete example from Israel. We are 3 days before Yom Kippur, which is the holiest days for the Jewish community all over the world. And now there is the government is planning to shut down all synagogues. But there is a question: should we also shut down the right to protest? Because a protester against the prime minister said protest is much more important than synagogues. And I think that this is who get to decide whether a protest in a democracy in a democracy is much more important than my Yom Kippur prayer at my synagogue. So it's going right now in Israel. This is a very big debate now.
Interesting. Yeah, I was not aware of that. Yeah, that's the problem. The moment you set up a rule like that, then somebody has to decide which we're going to allow and which we're not going to allow, and what the criteria of judgment or assessment are, and so forth. And so, who's that? You, me? We set up a language police committee, or and how do we enforce it? And it's pretty simple. Like with protests, when they turn violent. Violence in which there's looting and rioting and fires and theft and so on. Those are just crimes. So, okay, we'll stop that. That seems pretty clear. But just peaceful protest, that's speech. Yes, like Seattle and Portland. It's terrible.
It's not really clear obvious. At all in Seattle to stop riots or to stop robbery from Apple stores. So now, even now in the US, things that we thought was so obvious, yes, there is crime and we need to stop crime, however it can be done. Now we say, no, you need to cancel the police.
Yes. Yeah, that's the problem with the far left. Now, I want to make a distinction. These are not liberals that are doing this. These are progressives. On the spectrum, it's far left, so-called regressive left, but they call themselves progressives. But they don't believe in progress at all. They think America has never been as racist and bigoted and backwards as in our history, which is completely wrong. So that's illiberalism, when we're going to silence people and squelch speech. Real liberalism is where you allow it. And so, these words have become very obfuscated and corrupted in the last 25 years or so, which is one reason I wrote this book. Was like, I'm really worried because my fellow liberals, I'm pretty socially liberal, well, fiscally conservative, but socially liberal. And it's my fellow liberals on that front that are mistakenly buying into this progressive belief about free speech, that it should be tempered and squelched. And that's not liberalism. That's illiberalism. Real liberalism is you allow everybody and anybody to have their say. It's foundational because it's the only way we can determine the truth. So what we want is to know what's real, what's true. In politics, in religion, in science, in nature, whatever. And the only way to find out, because none of us are omniscient, we're not deities, so we don't know what the truth is. So we have to kind of grope at it through experimentation and testing. And that includes the marketplace of ideas, where we debate ideas like democracy or free speech or, the military, the draft, whatever, face masks. The only way to find out what's true is to talk about it. And, all we have are our thoughts, and our speech is the expression of our thoughts. So free speech, to me, is fundamental to all other rights. It's the foundation of all the other rights that derive from that.
Now, Michael, I hear your arguments from other important figures in the US, like Dave Rubin, Danny Sprague for sure, Adam Carolla, Jordan Peterson, even Alan Dershowitz, Chomsky, etc. All the people that say, listen, I'm liberal, but all the progressive, all the people who claim to be liberal say, Pinker was I think, banished from, I don't know why, because he say, yes, that there are real physiological differences between male and females. And which leads me to your first book, because I'm a mentalist. Just a second. This is your first book. Okay. Okay. Now, as a skeptic, you used to be against the orthodoxy, but the religious orthodoxy. You started, and please correct me, as a debunker of spiritualists, of mediums, of all this claim to have supernatural powers, the Uri Geller styles. But nowadays, it seems that you target your arrows not to the conservative part, because Dave Rubin considers himself as a conservative right now, and he said all opinions should be heard. You target your arrows and you target your words to the far left or to the left. Am I correct?
Oh, I'm very critical of the far right and conservatives as well. and I always have been. I mean, when I wrote Why People Believe Weird Things, I have a couple of chapters in there about critical of creationists, which is a right, Christian religious right movement, and Holocaust denial, which is a far right movement. So the reason I'm now targeting my arrows, as you put it, I like that metaphor, toward the left is because it's been corrupted by political correctness and this kind of woke policy of illiberalism in the name of progress, but it's not progress, it's regress. So if it seems like I'm giving a pass to conservatives, I'm not. I'm still critical of conservatives. And even though, Dave Rubin and I are friends, and Jordan Peterson and I are friends, and I guess they're conservatives, although Dave calls himself a classical liberal, which I do
Classical,
too.
yes. They are all
classical liberal.
classical liberals, yes.
Yeah. Now, Dave, he does hang out with people like Shapiro and Dennis Prager, who are self-proclaimed conservatives. Okay, but let's make a distinction between policies that we may debate between liberals and conservatives, maybe immigration or tax rates or abortion, something like that. Those are all debatable. But again, you have to have free speech. Both sides have to be committed to listening to the other side and not canceling the other side if you disagree with them, but counter them with better arguments. And if you don't have very good arguments, well, too bad for you. Go get some. So like the analogy I use at my class that I teach at Chapman University, Skepticism 101, How to Think Like a Scientist. These are freshmen. They're first-year students right out of high school, right? So most of them are pretty liberal. They're almost all pro-choice on the abortion issue. So I asked them, what do you think are the best arguments for the pro-life side? And most of them have no idea what they don't even know what the arguments are. They just think, well, conservatives just hate women or something like that.
By the way,
that's not an argument.
By the way, after listening carefully to Dennis Prager, Ben Shapiro, and even Dinesh D'Souza, which worked heavily on this very subject, I still don't understand the best argument for pro-life, because pro-life.
Well, their argument is that their argument is that it's a living organism. It's a human being inside there. Dinesh, for example, makes the argument that when a woman gets pregnant and she wants the baby, she talks about it like it's.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I got confused. I didn't understand the argument for pro-choice. For pro-life, I understand.
Oh, for pro-choice. For pro-choice.
Yes, and I even heard Sam Harris and say, yes, after, like, it's all about how many days into the from conception, because everybody is agree that, like, in the 8th month, it's like a murder.
Yeah, that's right. And in fact, in America, if a woman is, let's say, 8 months pregnant and she's killed, it's a double homicide, right? So legally. But we're talking about two different things here. We have the kind of biological or scientific perspective on when life begins, and you have the legal perspective. So legally, you just have to draw the line somewhere. It's completely arbitrary, right? So because to have a law, you have to define it, very operationally define it specifically, and say, okay, after this date. Yeah. Okay. Now, but of course, from a scientific perspective, there's no point at which life begins. It begins at the very beginning. It never ended. It goes back, billions of years. And we have a continuum in which we at some point have to draw a line and call it a category. So we're shifting from continuous thinking to categorical thinking. And this is the problem why it's such a contentious issue, is because there is no place to draw the line. So usually, I think Dave Rubin also makes this point. He agrees with me largely on this, that, when you can say something like not just the heartbeat, but the neural networks are largely in place by the 27th week, I think is the latest evidence on that. Then after that, you might think of it as a sentient being, and therefore it would be wrong to kill it. And most abortions happen long before that, in any case.
Okay. Nevertheless, I would say that, I'm sorry. Nevertheless, I would say that you have more in common in the way of debating those issues, even with Dennis Prager and Ben Shapiro, than with Ocasio-Cortez, because they are willing to hear your arguments and answer with a better or less better argument. Yes, but we are today in the far left, we almost don't hear a rational argument. This is, you are bad. Ben Shapiro had his book, Bullies. When the left disagree with you, he makes you a bad person. And I think that you target, and many of your examples in your latest book are going in this direction. The far left is not listening to other sides. Am I correct?
Yes, that's right. So that's all true. But let's not let conservatives off the hook. You know, conservatives say they're in favor of small government. No, they're not. They're in favor of huge government on things that they want, like military, police, the judicial system, the criminal justice system. You know, they like to spend all the money they can and raise taxes when they need to. So let's not let them off the hook. And, you know, conservatives say, well, we believe in individual freedom and autonomy. No, you don't. Because if you did, you'd let women make their own reproductive choices. Oh, no, that's different. We need to control what women do with their sexuality. Why? Well, because we're Christians, or because we think, you know, life begins at conception, or we think, oh, no, that's not a scientific argument. And that's not an argument in favor of freedom and autonomy and liberty. That's an argument that you want to impose your values on other people. And they used to make this argument about, you know, same-sex marriage and gay rights. You know, Republicans are only too happy to go straight into the bedrooms of two consenting adults and tell them what they can and cannot do with their genitalia, okay? Conservatives are not in favor of liberty and freedom, right? That's why I'm not a conservative.
And we are going into this classical liberal thing. Now, I've prepared like philosophical question regarding your latest book, and so let me get it straight. Now, you try to convince that a society is better off allowing freedom of speech, but it seems like the divide is so deep that some of the people most in need of your message don't see themselves as part of the same society as their counterparts. BLM, Black Lives Matter, for example. They want nothing to do with the other side, let alone build a society together. Now, maybe the situation is so bad that they just don't care. What do you think?
Well, yes, that's a good way to put it. I think what people on the left, when they express their support for Black Lives Matter, they're signaling a commitment to racial equality, which we're all in favor of course. But then the shift comes when they emphasize equality of outcome rather than equality of opportunity. So the moment you make that transition to what your criteria is that you're aiming for in society, that is to say, let's say there's 10% blacks, I think it's 13% blacks in America. So you need to have 13% programmers at Google who are black, or 13% CEOs of Fortune 500 companies that are black, and so forth. And the moment you set up that criteria and then you don't get those results, then what? Well, that's where big government comes in. And so here conservatives are against that form of big government and liberals are in favor of it. The problem there is that you're never going to have a perfect outcome, because it comes down to what people actually want to do for a living, let's say, as careers, and what they're good at. And, you know, and this idea that, you know, we should all be able to be whatever we want to be is nonsense. You know, most jobs that are available, I can't do, you know, and in my livelihood, I meet scientists from all fields, and, you know, 99% of them I can tell are way smarter than me on what they're doing, and I would have no chance of succeeding in being a scientist in that particular field. That's just the way it is. And so the goal of a civil society should be to just lower the barriers and let people do whatever they want, and no obstructions.
Okay, which leads me to, I think, one of the hottest potato ever existed in the American culture, the intelligence thing. Now, when you wrote Why People Believe Weird Thing Again, you had Stephen Jay Gould as one of forward by Stephen Jay Gould.
He wrote the forward.
Author, yes, the author of the mismeasure of man, which is an entire book dedicated to debunk another entire book, the bell curve. Now, I read
Oh,
this.
no, 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 that not quite. That's not quite right. No.
Please.
Steve's book, Mismeasure Man, was written, 20 years before the bell curve. But Steve's book was written in the 70s. Bell curve was in the 90s. The copy you have there of Gould's book, has an addendum in which he's critical of the bell curve. And I know Charles Murray was pretty unhappy about that. He felt that Gould did not give him a fair treatment, but that's a separate issue. Most of Gould's book stands perfectly solid because the history of intelligence testing, particularly as it's embedded in kind of a racist culture and these racial differences in intelligence, that was bad. I mean, everybody today who studies intelligence agrees that, the stuff before, say, 1950s or whatever, was pretty corrupted by these kind of white supremacist, racist attitudes that pretty much everybody held. So I would defend Gould on that. I think where he perhaps goes too far is in more modern research on intelligence. The mistake everybody makes, I think, and you can see behind me the cover of the latest issue of Skeptic on race, because this is yet again another contentious issue here in 2020. People are confusing population and race. Race is a social construct, the word. What biologists study that's not socially constructed are populations, genetic populations of groups of people. So you can't say blacks are good at basketball and are better than whites at basketball, but whites are better at programming than blacks. This is a nonsensical kind of way to talk about it because it's populations. So certain populations of
book, ethnic differences. It clearly doesn't say race; it say ethnic differences. But nevertheless,
yes, but even I know Charles Murray. He's usually pretty careful, but like his latest book that I just read, Human Diversity, the subtitle is "The Biology of Gender, Race, and Class." Why did he put race in the title of his book when in fact he never uses race in the book? He uses
nothing to lose.
Populations or ethnicity. So it's a weird thing. Again, this word race, it's so corrupted. West African populations are better at sprinting in track and field. Kenyan blacks are better at marathons. And so you can't say blacks are X. Which blacks and what constitutes a black? What if you're 80% black and you have in your history going back generations some white? How would you catch? So again, it's just so nonsensical. We're just talking about populations of people and how they vary, and there's no question that populations vary, of course. And but again, historically, this word race is so loaded with emotional baggage that people, they just lose their minds talking about it on both sides. So I say, drop the word, stop using it, talk about populations, then that puts us in the realm of science.
Okay, now let me go. My third book was published exactly 1 year ago, called Intelligence: The Unpleasant Truth, and
okay, what's the unpleasant truth?
There are a lot of unpleasant truths, and one of the unpleasant truths, I would say that there are at least 3 unpleasant truths. Now, you said yourself that you decided never to research IQ, especially in the context of racial differences, because such research can torpedo, it's your words, one's career.
Yeah.
You also said that you encourage any researcher to pursue such a path because, as you put it beautifully, knowledge is what will ultimately set us free. Yes?
Yeah, I wrote that, almost 25 years ago. I still stand by that. I think if anything, it's even worse now in terms of torpedoing your career. It's very risky to go into that field. And so those that do, I'm glad that they do, and particularly those that are careful about talking about populations and not race, that's fine. But in principle, yes, people should study anything they want, of course. In terms of what I was interested in, I mean, the reason I didn't go into studying race and IQ, for example, well, there's 100 other subjects in psychology I didn't go into. I just study the things that I'm interested in and good at. So It wasn't so much that I was worried about ruining my career, although I just decided I'd rather pick other battles, because clearly, I've targeted religion and politics, and that's been no less controversial
Yeah.
for my career. But anyways,
Let
yeah.
me
So
give you a
this
slide.
idea, though, of unpleasant truths, I mean, you're saying it in a way that these things are absolutely true, and we know for sure X, and therefore we should be able to talk about it. Well, some of that's debatable. I don't know what I haven't read your book, so but I'd like to read your book. I don't know.
Yet.
Is it in English yet? Because I'm afraid I don't read.
Unfortunately, no. But I really,
Yeah.
I would say, like, I think that there are three or four truths about intelligence. One, that there is something that's called intelligence and has a manifestation in your brain. In other words, high intelligence people have different brain, yes, and you can see it using fMRI than low intelligence people. It's not a social thing, a social construct. It's not something, it's like Gould say, the G doesn't exist. One can see as a other neurological path with high IQ people. This is one. The other is that intelligence is one of the most important factors in our society today. It's not the only one, but it's one of the most important factors. The other is that there are cognitive differences between men and women, male and females, and those cognitive differences are massively influence how our society looks like, okay? And the other, that there are ethnic differences. And those ethnic differences is, I think, what divides the US for the last 50 years. Now, let me quote Thomas Sowell, who said that at the beginning of the 20th century, all racial differences were regarded as explained as race, but now all racial differences are explained as racism. Now, everything that we see, that there is, it's not equal between whites and black and Hispanic. And by the way, it's not just white and black, it's the Asian that get lower their SAT in Harvard and MIT because they are, like, on average, 105 IQ points. So I think that this is a very important issue, mainly because we are in a secular society. And this is what I wanted to ask you, because if I'm in a secular society, some people worth more than other people. Elon Musk worth to the United States much more than me because he contributes more. So if you say, listen, there is no transcendent value to men, so yes, high intelligent people or highly productive people are much more contributing much more to society, therefore, and this is a therefore, worth more. Would you agree? I
Yeah,
guess
no,
you don't
see,
agree.
well, you made a couple moves there. Worth more? No, absolutely not. I mean, it's not clear that Elon Musk is worth more than Michael Jordan or, Joe the plumber, right? I mean, that's a value judgment that you're making that is not quantifiable in some objective sense, unless you say, well, electric cars are the most important thing anybody could ever do, therefore Elon Musk is number one, or something like that. Why are I have an electric car? I drive a Tesla. But I'm not going to say electric cars are the most important thing we should assess as valuable to society. It's one of 1,000 things that I think we should value, or 1,000,000 things, whatever. Okay. And also, like, let's just take the example of gender differences in cognitive abilities. There's so much variation, and there's so many different cognitive abilities. So the moment you drill down on any of those, like, women have better verbal skills, men have better spatial skills. But even in that, you have to drill down more, because there's multiple different kinds of spatial skills and multiple different kinds of verbal skills. And some of them, women are better than men. But which populations of men and women are you measuring? And you say Asian. Okay, Asia is a pretty big place, Roy. Which parts of Asia are you talking about? We're talking about immigrants that came here to go to Harvard. Okay, that's not Asians. That's one particular population. You can call it an ethnic group if you want, but but when you drill down, you go, okay, well, they had a certain kind of upbringing, right? The parents have lots of books in their houses, and they had lots of early training, and a culture and a norm of academic excellence, right? If you don't have that, it's not because of your genes or some heritable difference in your ethnic population. It's because you were raised in an environment, probably, if we want to talk about, African American inner city families where, there's usually no father, right? There's few books in the house. They start reading later, and it just escalates from there. Where's the genes there? Where's the heritability difference there? I mean, there's so many different factors you're talking about. And then if you want to pull back in terms of what's important in society, well, that's also quite arbitrary. I mean, again, there's 99.9% of jobs that are available I can't do. I'm a pretty smart guy. I'm super hardworking. I was raised in an environment with, dedication to being high in conscientiousness and responsibility and so on. And yet I still can't do most jobs. And that includes, the electrician or the plumber that comes here. I'm very impressed by what they could do. I can't do most of these things. So to place a value on a hierarchy of like, well, Google programmers, that's the highest. And there aren't enough African Americans or women doing that. Therefore, on either side, left or right, that we're making a value judgment. That's a move that I think is a mistake to make.
I would say that this is a mistake to make because any person, and I'm a religious, I'm an Orthodox Jew and a skeptic. So it's a mishmash. Okay? I teach.
Wait, so you believe in God?
Yes.
Do you believe in God? Yeah, you
yes,
do?
but I don't believe God exists.
Well, I don't know what that means.
I teach the guide for the perplexed by Maimonides. So my notion of God is not the notion of Christianity, is not the notion of the Sistine Chapel. Yes, it's a different notion of God. But yes, I'm a practicing Jew. But nevertheless, I'm very skeptic. I told you before, I'm a mentalist. So I think that most of the supernatural things that we see are like hoax. Yes, I don't believe that Uri Geller. Many people ask me about Uri Geller. He had this very big show in Israel like 10 years ago. And they ask me, what do you think about Uri Geller? And I say, I think that Uri Geller believes that he has powers. And I truly think
I'm not sure. Are you sure? Because I follow this pretty closely. I think he knows he's a bullshitter, and that he, when he was bending spoons and all that stuff back in the 70s, he knew he was using magic tricks. That's not self-deception. Like I could see mentalists. Like I had a friend who used to work the Psychic Friends Network. He was a magician. He was a mentalist. And he told me, most of the stuff I was doing cold reading, but sometimes I would get something. And I'm thinking, maybe there's something to this, like ESP or something like that. And, of course, to me, it's like, no, you're just remembering your hits and you're forgetting the misses and so forth. But so I could see where like a cult leader starts off as a scam artist and then thinks, well, maybe I do have special powers, because all these people are worshiping me. And, I seem to know things that other people don't. Maybe I'm, connected supernaturally. I could see how self-deception works that way.
If you do cold reading long enough, or if you are practicing cold reading long enough, eventually some of the guys will believe that, yes, I can get something.
But not spoon bending.
Spoon
bending is different.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
But nevertheless, I'm skeptic. I know, and I know people, at the end of my show, people come and say, could you give me a blessing or something like this? And I know that I have no special power whatsoever except for placebo. So I know many people from the religious community say, listen, I saw this rabbi and he is amazing and et cetera, et cetera. And I don't believe any of this because I don't believe that the laws of physics ever breaks. I do
Yeah.
believe, however,
So why even use the word God at all? I mean, why not just say I'm a secular Jew or I'm a cultural Jew? I like the customs and the traditions and the history and so on, but I don't believe in any kind of God. I mean, unless you mean like Spinoza's, the laws of nature.
no, I
Like
don't think.
Einstein
No,
leaned
no.
on Spinoza. When Einstein used the word God, and Stephen Hawking too, he just meant the laws of nature. It's just a word.
Yes, definitely. It's not Spinoza. It's not Spinoza. And the first verse of Genesis said, in the beginning, God created, in the beginning, I think, in the chaos. In the beginning, God created earth and heaven, which means we are not pantheistic. There is no pantheistic view of, in Judaism, there is, for etc. But God is not nature. God is not the world. God is outside the world.
Yeah,
Nevertheless, the
yeah,
notion of God is something that a human being cannot grasp. I would say that I don't believe in God of gaps. I don't need God to close any gaps that I have in my scientific view or in my scientific research. Okay, God
yeah.
is not function as something to solve the mystery of science for me. I think
Yeah.
that God
But
is
you're still,
yes,
but you made another move there.
yes.
God is outside of space and time, outside of the universe. Well, how do you know?
I don't.
Because you don't know. No,
I
that you
don't.
just made that up. That's just an assertion, right? So now, usually when I ask Christians this,
I
they'd say,
don't.
"Well,
I don't. I
because he
believe. Yes,
reaches
I
in
don't.
periodically." But wait, you believe? You said you believe in the God that's outside of space and time.
Yes, but nevertheless,
Why?
I
What do you
hmm?
mean by believe? What do you mean by believe?
It's like I believe in the laws of nature. Okay,
Okay,
I
that's
also
fine,
believe.
but that's
I
not
also
God.
believe.
That's
I
just
don't.
the laws of
I'm
nature.
not one. I'm not 100% sure because ever since Popper, we know that the one thing that we cannot say is it's like the structure of a scientific proof is that you only can prove that something is not correct. You cannot. There's like the
Yeah, that's
black
right.
swan.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
like the black swan.
Right.
Now,
Yes.
I
Yes.
I am
Yes.
skeptic. I don't know whether the laws of physics are truly correct. And ever since Einstein debunked Newton, maybe the laws that we know right now are not correct. But nevertheless, I have the very strong feeling, very strong clarity that we have that there is something beyond. Now, I would say that in one of your recent interview, you said the host asked you about meaning, and you said there is no meaning. We as human beings, we create meaning. Yes, we create
Yeah.
meaning, and
Yep.
then he asked you, but this is artificial. It is no meaning. And
Yeah.
then you said,
Right.
this is artificial, but is meaningful to us because meaning is subjective. Am I correct?
That's right. But of course, it's grounded in human nature and biology and so on.
Yes,
The things that
yes,
I
of
find
course.
meaningful, my dog's not going to find meaningful. We're
Yes,
different species, so it's species specific meaning. Let's call it
yes,
that. But
definitely.
not but not outside of the universe, not outside of the world,
Now,
or outside
my
of nature.
question, yes, but my question is, and ever since I think the strange death of Europe pointed it very clearly when Douglas Murray said, we have a secular culture in Europe that deals with a very strong religious community or religious Islamic community. And when this artificial meaning is tackled or attacked by a fanatic Muslim who thinks that meaning is not artificial, meaning is very, very concrete from God, one cannot win in this battle if you're an European. If your meaning is artificial, you don't believe strong enough to fight for it. Would you say that
Yeah.
this one of Mary's ideas?
Yeah, I like Charles. I'm sorry,
No, no,
Douglas
no, go
Murray.
ahead.
But the counter to that is not we need religion on the other side to counter the Muslim. We need to say the Christian or the Jewish just call it the Judeo-Christian worldview, to counter the Muslim worldview. That's not the answer. The answer is secular laws and customs that say there is no absolute truth, because if there was, there wouldn't be multiple religions, and there's no way to find out which is the right one. There's no algorithm we can run. There's no experiments in a Popperian sense. We can falsify the Islamic worldview and confirm that the Judeo-Christian worldview is more likely to be true than the Islamic one because of the test. There's nothing like that for religion.
It's less likely
So the
to
only
be.
way to exist is to have this kind of freedom of religious expression. You can believe whatever you want. I can believe whatever I want, but we have laws and customs in place that says you can't force yours on me, and vice versa. I can try to convince you through arguments, but I can't force you. Okay, so that's the solution to that. Now, in terms of the battle of ideas, the solution to this kind of relativism of the secular left, that there is no absolute meaning, anybody could do whatever they want and it's all equal. No, that's not true either, because we have a human nature that guides what we find meaningful, or what leads to a happy life or a meaningful existence and so forth. That, I talk about that in in the book, the latest book, is that it's not relative, it's not objective and absolute, it's not relative either. It's guided. There's these sort of channels that direct us by human nature that we can discover through science. Okay, and we can test it and so forth. But just go back to what you were saying before.
But the fanatic Muslims are not going to agree to this bank of ideas, and if they are not going to agree, they're going to explode in buses, just like happened in Israel. So my question is,
there you're talking about that's a different problem. The problem is terrorism and violence. The problem is not the problem is their ideas are wrong, but that's a separate thing. They can believe whatever they want. I don't care what they believe, as long as they don't blow up buses. If they're blowing up buses, then we have a problem of terrorism, and we know how to solve that. We have some idea on that, but that's a different issue.
I think that Europe, this is exactly Mary's point. Europe doesn't know how to solve it because it doesn't believe anymore in its values, like the Western traditions, the classical, the big books, the Judeo-Christian tradition. Europe is becoming more and more secular. Therefore, it has no power, so weapon to fight this very, very dangerous ideology. Murray himself said, I'm an atheist, but I need to act as if I believe in the transcendent values and the moral rights and the moral foundation of the Judeo-Christian tradition.
Yeah, I find that kind of argument, I find that argument, first of all, wrong, but also patronizing. And it's a little bit like, I don't need belief in God, but the little people do. They're so dumb, they're so backwards, and they need some kind of comfort or some kind of rules. That's bullshit. No way. That's treating people as if they're children. Right? Anybody can understand secular principles. We just go back to Locke and Hume and Thomas Jefferson and John Stuart Mill and Jeremy Bentham and utilitarianism and so on.
Locke wasn't secular.
Yes, but I don't care what he personally believed. I mean his ideas.
But Locke said
his ideas.
Just a second, Michael. Locke said in one of his writings, there is on tolerance, I think. I don't know how you translate on tolerance. This is one of his writings because there is in Hebrew it's called al sovlanut, or on being more patient, about tolerance. I think this is one of his book, and he said you need to be tolerant to everyone except from the atheist because they have nothing to lose. So it's
see, there you go. Even Locke was restricted.
Yes,
but I'm talking about the ideas. I'm talking about the ideas of these men, not their personal lives or what they personally believe. That's irrelevant. But you touch on an idea there of that, that Popper identified. This is Popper's paradox, that, you know, in a free society where you tolerate everybody and you're not intolerant, then the intolerant people can get a toehold and get power, and therefore be intolerant of the tolerant people, and therefore intolerance will win. Well, no, that's not actually what happens. Yes, you can find a few isolated examples even in the 20th century, say Nazi Germany or communist Russia, where yes, that does happen. But in a free society where you have a free press, and back to where we started, this is why we need to defend free speech, because the only way that can happen is if A, you silence people, and B, you lock them up. And you enforce it through controlling the press. So you have a state media, and you have new norms that say people cannot speak up. Because when people can't speak up, they don't know what other people are thinking. And so you get this effect called pluralistic ignorance, where everybody thinks that everybody else believes that. So I guess I'll go along with it. Or I guess, yeah. So I guess I can't speak up because everybody else believes something else, even though they don't. This is the emperor's new clothes, right? You know, everybody's pretending that the emperor has clothes until the little boy says he's naked. And then people go, oh, I can say that he's naked because I can see with my own eyes, right?
It's like
so
when you
in the case of Nazi Germany, this question I've spent my whole career trying to answer. How is it that you can convert a nation of intelligent, cultured, educated people ensconced in Western values into Nazis in a couple of years? And the answer is they didn't. The majority of Germans were not National Socialists. You know, they came to power without a majority. And the moment they got any kind of power at all, they took over the press, they silenced people, they set up the concentration camp system. You know, there were thousands of camps. We hear about Auschwitz and Birkenau and Majdanek and the big ones, but there were thousands in the KL system. And anybody who spoke up against the regime, and I'm talking here about early 30s, you know, 34, 35, 36, before the war, you know, and so everybody could see that anyone who dissented disappeared. You know, where'd they go? They went off, they were sent to these camps. Therefore, everyone kept their mouth shut, even though the majority did not go along with National Socialism, particularly the kind of exterminationists side of National Socialism. And therefore, the whole thing floated in the ether for 12 years because of the silencing of people's voices, the silencing of the press, and so on. So as long as we maintain in the West a free press and support of free speech, again, this is why I'm critical of the left, because that's not liberalism. The answer to tolerating intolerance is that you have to let people speak. And the moment you go the other direction, then that sets up an opportunity for intolerant people to take over.
I think that we have so much in common. By the way, I must say that there is another theory regarding the Nazism with Hitler willing executioner. I don't know how to spell it. That
yes, I know Daniel Goldhagen's book. I've read
and he said,
I've read both of his books carefully.
Exactly the opposite. But I think that there is any person can convert it to anything with giving the right circumstances. And like, let me ask you like the last question. First, thank you so much. This was a mind-blowing conversation interview, and please go and buy fast the. No, not this. This is one. Now the last question that I would like to ask you is, this is a book, great book. Please come and please buy it on Amazon. Now let me finish with my last question. And it seems like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, being an atheist was like the only thing that you could be if you are a very smart and intelligent person. We had the four horsemen of the, like we have Sam Harris, and we have Christopher Hitchens, and we have Dennett, and we have His Holiness Dawkins. And you couldn't say, and this I got from Rabbi Lord Sachs. Whenever Rabbi Jonathan Sachs mentioned Dawkins, he said, His Holiness Dawkins. And it seems to me that nowadays, after Peterson, and even Dave Rubin, he said, I'm an atheist. And after a year of lecturing with Peterson said, I think I changed my mind. So it became more prevalent. Yes, it's an option to be an intelligent and a believer. And I think that Jordan Peterson, with his biblical lecture, made a huge difference in this approach toward religion and the Bible. Would you consider this as well? As a
Well,
tool?
I'd say the way you phrased it, yes. Culturally, maybe it's a more defensible position, but what's the it? What is it you're believing? You know, when you push Jordan on this question, you know, it's not at all clear that he believes in a personal God. I mean, what most people mean by God is a personal being, an agent that is conscious in some way, that knows we're here, that exists, you can pray to, and so forth. This is what most people mean by God. And when you push Jordan on this, it's not at all clear that that's what he believes. Now, he may say it's okay for other people to believe that, or people need that, whatever. I'm not talking about that. You know, it's like,
I
you know,
think that
Dan Dennett
Jordan
makes the
Peterson is
point
a
of
closet Jew.
maybe. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Same thing with Dave Rubin, you know, and even you, Roy, you made a comment earlier, maybe 10, 15 minutes ago, about belief. Well, what do you mean by belief? You said,
I will say,
I mean,
and
here
I
you
would
are.
okay,
Yeah.
this is good. I think that being atheist is very nice, and there is like a joke that a dead atheist is one who dressed up very well, but has no place to go. But it's not about
Yeah.
afterlife.
Okay.
I don't believe in afterlife, okay? I don't believe in
Okay.
afterlife. Even if afterlife exists, it's not me with my memories that goes up, okay?
Yeah.
God
Yeah.
must, when I dead, God format and reset the SD card. The SD card is going up blank, okay? This is what I believe. It's not about afterlife. It's not about hell.
Well,
Hell
that is the original Jewish conception of
yes,
heaven.
yes.
There's no heaven.
I'm
There's
an
no place to
Orthodox.
go.
I'm an Orthodox.
I wrote about that in Heavens on Earth. I wrote about that. Yeah.
Yes.
So,
But I will
but I'm
say,
not talking about the afterlife.
no,
You
okay. Yes,
said
yes,
you.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
I will tell you this. I believe that, and this is like it's not about it's not about Judaism, yes, but this is what I believe. I believe that the uh, most problematic point with atheism is what is the foundation of morality. If you ask Sam Harris, and I heard Sam Harris many times, it's rational. I heard this conversation with Prager, and Dennis Prager told him, I believe murder is wrong, and you also believe murder is wrong. I believe murder is wrong because God told me so. Why do you believe murder is wrong? And he said, if you talk with your neighbor, you will get to this conclusion. This is what Sam Harris said. Pinker said,
That wasn't Sam. That was me and Prager. You
no,
saw
no, 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 no.
Sam never.
I will also, there is you, but there is also, there is a radio show with Sam Harris and Dennis Prager that Sam
Oh, I haven't
Harris
heard that.
wanted. I will send you at the end of, and I will put link in the description, Sam Harris and Dennis Prager. Now, Steven Pinker said that it's about evolution. We got our morality from evolution. I think both of those arguments are false. I need God to have an objective, transcendent thing that this is true. Without this outside transcendent, nothing can be regarded as true. I think I need God for the foundation of my morality. I don't say that
Really?
Sam Harris is
Because
not
how do you know what God thinks is right or wrong?
Oh, this is nice. And by the way, in the Jewish literature, we say it doesn't matter what God thinks.
Well, it matters epistemologically because you have to get it from somewhere. You got it from reading the Bible or from the Torah or from your rabbi, your parents, your culture. Those are sources of knowledge that are not objectively reliable. They have certain values in cultural context and historical context that maybe
Absolutely.
they're right, maybe wrong. There's no way to know. So unless you're talking to God directly through prayer or the inner voice in your head or whatever, but even that's not reliable because we know people hear voices. And we
Yeah.
know people, in prayer, you can talk to the dead all you want, but the dead can't talk back, right? So talking to somebody, that's not a source of reliable knowledge. Now, as you know, Plato debunked this idea way back with Euthyphro's dilemma, that, why do we need the middleman at all if there's these true objective values that are out there in the moral ether somewhere floating around? You still have to access them somehow through the Bible or whatever. And so if they're really there, what do we need God for? We just go discover them ourselves. On the other hand, I'm not a cultural or moral relativist. We're not just making stuff up. So you mentioned Pinker. What he's talking about there is what's an area called evolutionary ethics, right? So there's certain, what we're trying to explain is why we have a moral sense at all. So that's what you need evolution for, a sense of right and wrong about certain things. And that's constrained by our human nature. Now, but that's explaining the origins of our moral emotions. That's not explaining what's right or wrong objectively. There you make the shift from, say, biology and evolutionary theory to philosophy. So this is why we have Kant and Hume and utilitarianism and Aristotle's virtue ethics, and we have John Rawls's theory of justice and so on. And there's no one theory that has emerged as the correct one. Like, it wasn't clear that Einstein was right, but after about 10, 15 years, his theories have been tested. It's like, okay, he's right. Nothing's going to emerge like that in the philosophy of ethics and morality, except for a handful that have survived. So, if we were to have a collection of people from around the world, from varying cultures and religions and political beliefs and so forth, there would emerge a certain common element that even religion discovered, something like the golden rule. I
No,
can't,
but they
for me to,
didn't. For any rules that you give me, I will find you people in different cultures throughout the world that says, no, this is not the case for me. Every people, take like the most simple one, for example, one should not murder without a decent cause, okay? One should not murder without a decent cause, okay? But what is a decent cause, okay? Now, and you won't find any moral value or moral principle that agreed upon everyone.
Okay, let me read to you my defense here from my book of this idea of where this comes from. Okay, so here it is. Excuse me. It is my hypothesis that in the same way that Galileo and Newton discovered physical laws and principles about the natural world that really are out there, so too have social scientists discovered moral laws and principles about human nature and society that really do exist. Just as it was inevitable that the astronomer Johannes Kepler would discover that planets have elliptical orbits, given that he was making accurate astronomical measurements, and given that planets really do travel in elliptical orbits, he could hardly have discovered anything else. Scientists studying political, economic, social, and moral subjects will discover certain things that are true in these fields of inquiry. For example, democracies are better than autocracies. Market economies are superior to command economies. Torture and the death penalty do not curb crime. That burning women as witches is a fallacious idea. That women are not too weak and emotional to run companies and countries. And most poignantly here, that blacks do not like being enslaved and that Jews do not want to be exterminated. Why? Just ask them. Okay. The reason that we know that slaveholders knew that slavery was wrong is because they had to use chains to keep them down, right? The fact that slaves tried to escape tells us they want freedom. That's part of our human nature, and that's why slavery. So I will say slavery is objectively wrong. It's objectively immoral. It's not just some cultural trend that we happen to embrace in the 21st century, and maybe next century everyone will love slavery, including the slaves. I don't think so, any more than I think that to use my other example in that essay on
okay, but
the
nevertheless,
Holocaust, since I've studied that.
First of all, Michael, I'm sure that you are not a skeptic. You are a believer. This is a very good and a very strong
Yes,
belief.
well, that's right. I do believe lots of things. Sure.
Okay. Now, but
based on evidence.
But give me I think that the weakest point in the argument that I would say, okay, people don't like being enslaved. This is something that I totally agree with you. But nevertheless, still today, we have cultures and we have places in planet Earth that enslaved people. So this moral principle that you give me, which is a very important one, doesn't count to all societies.
Yes, it does. The slave holders, of course, embrace slavery, but not the slaves.
But why
just
do
like
the
I would
slave
say,
holders? So if the slave,
because
this is what
any more than women want to have their genitalia mutilated. The women don't want that. The girls don't want that. It's the adults. It's the culture. It's their corrupted religion that's driving that. It's their attempts to control female sexuality that goes way back in our evolutionary path. But that doesn't make it morally right. It's morally wrong. How do you know? Ask the affected people, not the moral doer, but the moral receiver, the recipient of the action. That's who you have to ask. I call it the ask first principle.
Okay. Now, this is, but I will tell you, just a second. Let me,
So while you're thinking, my point is that we can have a form of objective morality based on reason and science, human nature, and so on. It's transcendent in the sense of it's not just me or you and our or Western culture, or American culture, or Israeli culture, whatever. It's human nature. We get it as members of our species, and to that extent, it's transcendent of culture, and therefore objective. In a sense, it's not. You don't need an external supernatural source of morality, and we know even if you did, it's not there, because there is, first of all, there's no God, and second of all, even if there was, how do we know what God thinks? So, well, we have the holy book. Well, which holy book? Because the holy books conflict with one another. So which is the right one? And therefore, then you run into a problem.
Okay, so first of all, so let me summarize it. And I would say that the one thing that I have to say in my defense, I don't know if my defense is different than your defense, because I truly think that there is an inherent moral sentiment within every one of us. And I think that this moral sentiment is divine. And because if it's not divine, again, you gave many examples of things that we now consider to be corrupted and wrong. But nevertheless, those things still exist and existed throughout history and exist now.
What do you mean by divine?
I mean that it's outside the biology. Outside the biology, and like Roger Scruton said, that there is something different, which is inherently different in men than in the most sophisticated ape. I think that there is
so if you're talking about moral values, do you mean like logic or mathematics? It's outside of the physical realm.
No,
it's like a platonic ideal, like truth or beauty.
I believe that you can't do a reduction of morality. You can't do a reduction of morality to rationality. You can't derive out from an is. You can't derive what right and wrong from your logic. And I think that
sure you can. I just did it for you. You just ask people, do you want to be enslaved? No, I don't.
But this is a very wishful thinking, and therefore I told you that you are a believer. And
I'm a believer in objective moral values, but by objective I don't mean external to human nature, supernatural, outside of biology or whatever and culture. It's part of us, but I mean, it's part of our species. So it's not just arbitrary, you, me, the West, whatever.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Ken.
Yeah.
Please go. Okay, now, wow. Again, I think that the most important conclusion from our mind-blowing discussion is that free speech is like the most important thing. And from everything John Stuart Mill wrote on liberty and said that we have 4 reasons why free speech must be, because A, I might be wrong and you might be right. B, I might be partially wrong and you might be partially right. C, I might be right, but you saying your opinion is making my side even much more solid. And fourth, any truth that need police to be truth is much less convincing. So
yes.
From John Stuart Mill on liberty to Michael Shermer last, giving the devil his due, first of all, I hope that you will get to say this well on the Bible Belt, because like this is like a good
yes, well,
a book
right.
in the Bible Belt.
Well, thanks for putting me in that good company. John Stuart Mill has been a lifelong hero of mine.
Yes, so Michael Shermer, Dr. Michael Shermer is the author of many, many books, and including this, Why People Believe Weird Things. You can't be a mentalist if you don't read this book. And after you...
I think you can, but I appreciate the plug anyway. Thank you, Roy. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.